Today I'll be teaching a foundational approach concerning the Church of Christ. This foundational approach is called the Amillennial doctrine. It's concerning the 1,000-year reign of Christ and the power that he had given to his apostles, how his church expanded, and when he comes again in the end time, it will be Judgment Day, and he will come with fire, and there will be no 1,000 years after his return. This is the amillennial doctrine, with the churches of Christ also, according to their foundational approach, has studied and believe and teach. Therefore, I too am also teaching this doctrine as well. St. Augustine was the father of amillennialism in the 4th century, being that many of Jesus' apostles and many of Jesus' followers also believed of his imminent return at the time, seeing that Paul himself also waited for him to come with fire and flaming vengeance to persecute those that were against him. But after so many centuries passing by, theology changed and people interpreted it different. And for the next 700 to 800 years, premillennial doctrine was counted for, being that Christ would return after so many years and he would come and establish his kingdom on the earth. And sometime in about 1200 AD, the amillennial belief system had come back into effect after about 800 years and continued to rule in different non-denominational churches and inspire certain groups and societies that also made a way for us today. And so the Church of Christ, the Catholic Church, Hebrew Israelites, and several non-denominational churches also believe in this foundation approach, which is confusing, and so many try not to teach it too much because it's kind of hard to understand. But I feel that God has given me a gift to bring back this foundational approach, which was taught by the father of amillennials, St. Augustine, and several other followers thereafter. And so I too have revised it and have brought it into effect. So I'll be going through step-by-steps trying to teach this foundational approach. So let's begin. The next several weeks I'll be teaching on this foundational approach, the 1,000-year reign, amillennial doctrine belief. And I'll be explaining the contents also in Revelations 12 as well, which are also a major leading inspirational teaching in the contents to reveal how God has also applied this timing to be so perfect in his eyes. And I'll be applying it with my figurative and literal interpretation, teaching on certain aspects in the Bible, as well as also revealing literal truths on what has already happened from the past. So let's begin. Revelations 12 verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now, this appearance is pretty much referred to as coming from out of nowhere. An appearance is something that just showed up. It just entered into the scene. So this appearance of a great wonder is a supernatural event that had taken place in heaven. It just appeared as a wonder. And the wonder is also like a great miracle, some kind of an awing sight that just makes people gasp for air. It's a wonder. It's something that you would have to think about and try to understand and how it happened. So it's a great wonder. And this great wonder appeared in heaven. And as we see in verse 1, what appeared, it seems to say that there was a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So the woman here is clothed with some kind of dress. And the dress that we see that is put onto this woman, which is not the father, but a woman, we see that she is clothed with the sun, the moon, and the stars. Seeing then, therefore, that the woman is clothed with the sun, the moon, and the stars, we also see them as a literal perspective that has taken place in our heavenly skies. And as a human being, when we look up into the heavens, we see the sun, the moon, and the sky. And so, being that this is not a real woman, we see here that this woman is a figurative of something that is taking place in which she is dressed. A woman that is clothed with what we as humans see as the universe and space. And so, being that she is cloaked with these things, it's not an actual woman that is apparently being placed here. This story is also a mythological belief that has been referenced in the past. According to this Bible passage, it reflects an ancient star god mythology. The story of a mother goddess pregnant with child, and in pursuit of her was a horrible monster who her child had defeated in the very end. And the 12 stars that are on her head are also known as the 12 zodiac signs in our sky. These zodiac signs draw out different little pictures that man has put together to align them as the 12 zodiac signs that align the sky. These 12 zodiac signs in our sky cover the eastern and western skyline and track with the sun's course of daily movement. So in other words, the sun and the moon shelter us in our sky by giving us lights, and you cannot separate one from the other. And so yes, we are all surrounded by God's phenomenon and this wonder that appeared in our universe. But due to such mythological beliefs and science and phenomenon, many men spiritually lose focus on the true light and fall into idolatry and star god worship, false gods, and different signs and wonders that also appear within the heavens as well. The 12 stars are also symbolically also represent the 12 tribes of Israel. It was the 12 tribes of Israel in which we all come from through the seeds of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel. And we too are known as stars. And also, like the amount of sand, none shall escape from his hand. And so we see then that all this is a symbolic to what is actually taking place in the spiritual. All these things are physical elements that man sees, and not the spiritual element in which we cannot fully see or comprehend due to the spiritual which we have not crossed over and passed on into that spiritual life to understand those things that are far and beyond us. So the woman is also, as it mentions here in verse 2, and being with child, she cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. This child that we're discussing is also known as Jesus, our Lord and Savior. But at this current time, she was not delivering the child just yet, seeing that Adam and Eve were first to come. Adam and Eve were the first human beings here on earth. Jesus, whom this lady is apparently giving birth to, came way after so many centuries of mankind. So for life to come into the picture, according to this woman, in the wonder of a spiritual wonder in heaven, she's giving birth to new life. And so God is the creator and maker of all these things. And so through this woman, Christ is also going to be born into life. And so just like we who are born into the flesh, who are brought forth from the womb by a pulse, the spiritual world is then transferred into the womb of the woman, giving birth and life to the pulse that later forms a human being like you and me, and where the spirit now rests inside. So this woman also represents a great womb where the angels also live, being that it was born in heaven and then transferred here into the body until we cross over, and then the spirit is free from the vessel until the glorified body is then subjected to it, and where we walk on a new earth with Christ in the heavenly Jerusalem, where he appears in the presence of God for us. So from my understanding, it is God who made the heavens, and God who made the earth. In Genesis 1, verse 14 through 8 says, And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the great light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So in the beginning, God made heaven. God also made earth. And it also understands that God was light, and God gave light. But at this certain particular time, God made lights in heaven to divide the day and divide the night. And so, as man traveled in history from the sun going down and the sun going up, it also calculated for man one day. And through the sun and the moon and the figure of the moon turning from full moon, cycling back to a full moon, man had also established months. And by the lining and position of the stars in which they traveled, and the positioning and moving of the stars back and forth from the positioning of the moon and the stars, man also determined years. So days, months, and years. And so God gave these lights in the heavens also for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So God had actually created these things that were brought forth by his power, and it's the woman that is actually cloaked with these things. Now, this woman also represents the eternal spirit. In Hebrews 9:14, How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Now, the point here is that, so Jesus, when he died and was buried, he transferred through this eternal Spirit without spot unto God. So Jesus, now coming from heaven, is born through a womb, is made flesh, and now as he ascends back into heaven, he enters into the eternal spirit, entering back and unifying himself with his complete identity. And therefore, through this eternal spirit, he now lives and reigns. This is where he had to go. According to my theology, the eternal spirit is also known as the existing proof of God's conscience brought into life. Because now you have the eternal Father, you have the eternal light who has now made life possible. And so through the woman which he establishes, not only cloaked with the sun, the moon, and the stars, which is the universal proof of God's conscience in this life, according to the carnal state of interpretation and the carnal state of man's knowing. This image is a manifested life that comes forth from the invisible. And so, being that no man can see God at any time, being that he is a great ball of light and a great power of light, and he is a life giver, and he is the creator, he is the one who gave life to all things that are made by him. God, being invisible and his Son producing forth, lived in his kingdom, along with many angels. And so this woman also represents a great womb where the angels also live. This is like the wonders of heaven that appeared that give life and an established setting for the angels. And also when God created man and created earth, also it gives the carnalized mind also the focus of a great mother that appears in the universe, being the proof of God's conscience brought into life. And so the eternal spirit is not what we see, but the thing that we can't see, in which Jesus, who through the eternal spirit entered and offered himself to God. And so this eternal spirit is also a living power, which the angels and the spirits and the angel of the Lord, all the holy spirits of God live there. And one united power of God as well.